at that time, let's say the 80s or the 90s.
The late 80s into 90s,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, Besides the Tuesday nights at Ortley's, what other jam sessions do you remember happening during those days?
Oh God, it was when Tony Williams had his thing. Around that time, I think the late 80s into the 90s, he had moved that session that was over at Slim Cooper's on Fridays. That became a Monday session at a place called the Blue Note. Right, that's also in the West Oak Lane section. We had a bunch of clubs there, and that was like the late '80s into the '90s. And we would do some weekend gigs there. They would have like Saturday matinees that were run by Sue Ford, who was another one. She played piano a little bit, but she was mainly just a jazz advocate. And we have jam sessions in there, and a lot of folks would come through. Kurt Rosenwinkel his aunt used to bring him in when he was like 14, 15, 16. He'd sit in with us, and we didn't know what he was doing at the time because it was just kind of weird sounding, but he knew what he was hearing. He just had to figure it out. So that's I always like to chuckle about that. He's one of the most influential guitar players playing on the scene, and has been for a while. But yeah, we had jam sessions there in 1996. So I'm starting to do the house band and all that. And at the time, I'm fairly entrenched in the Philly scene. We had this camp for like a week at Cheyney University, and it was I forget what it was called, oh God, I forget what it was called. Having to do with living jazz thing. But anyways, Tony was running it. Terrell Stafford, who was actually teaching at Cheyney at the time, he was one of the instructors. He brought his guys, and he brought Stephen Scott, a wonderful piano player, Paul Carr, who does a lot of stuff in the D.C., Washington, D.C. area, playing and mentoring. He actually mentored Terrell and Tim Warfield when they were going to school down there. Shirley Scott was actually on faculty. Some of the guys who had taught with Tony at the Mount Airy Cultural Center that we had done like earlier, like oh God, I forget their names. Sonny Hoxter and Joe Stevenson, a couple of those older guys, myself, and it was a week-long thing where it was a camp. We stayed on campus, and we get up in the morning and do exercises and eat lunch and have like ensembles, and broke up into small groups, and that's where I knew that I wanted to do that. And at the time, I was I was playing and stuff, but I was doing some very self-destructive things. I was kind of messed up, so yeah, I was getting high and doing some things. But that week was like that was a sober week for me, and I realized at the time, I mean, that actually helped me kind of get my stuff together just on that tip. I don't want to go into detail, but a lot of that was going on. But we had people, a lot of young kids came, and it was free. And folks like Jaleel Shaw, he was in that group. The singer Bilal Oliver, who's gone on to do like some R&B kind of stuff.
Now, how old were these kids? And how did they pick them to put them in this?
Well, some of them had been involved in Mount Airy Cultural Center. There was also another group I should mention, the Clef Club, Lovett Hines, and along the same while Tony was doing his thing, Lovett was dealing with some kids. So a lot of those kids came out of his program. He was another mentor. He didn't really, I don't know if he played an instrument, but he was definitely into mentoring and helping kids out. So they were kind of parallel, and they kind of cross-referenced. So kids from that program, kids from Mount Airy Cultural Center, and just kids that were just sitting in that just wanted to play and that were interested in music. So they picked them, and so I think there were a handful of kids from Camden, New Jersey, including the Dickerson brothers, who went on to do great things. Are still doing great things at Camden out there. I think that's where they got the idea to take it back to where they're going. So yeah, I mean, it was concentrated, and we had some really talented kids, and we also had some kids that were works in progress. And I remember working with some kids, and I remember one guy, he was having difficulty with a passage, and one of the other kids was like, I don't want him to play the solo on my tune. They wrote stuff, and I remember, he was kind of despondent, so we went and I was working with him, and within a half hour, he's starting to sound like Wayne Shorter, and it was like, and just he was getting it, and we would just work, and it was experiences like that let me know this is what I really. I mean, I still want to play and do stuff, but I want a big part. This is what I need to do. This was almost like, like it was like, this is your assignment. This is your assignment. This is what you're going to. Yeah, you can pursue whatever, but you're not going to go on the road. You're not. That's not for you. That's why I could have stayed in New York if I wanted to pursue that, but I came to Philly, and I realized this is a blessing. I can actually be part of this. I can actually help people learn as I'm learning. So that week was very pivotal, very pivotal in me really making that a big part of what I did musically.
Now let me ask you a question about that. Now, when you're just described a troubled student that was having some problems, how do you empathically zero in, or what is your modus operandi about finding where their problems are that's impinging on the music and how to get them around it?
Well, in this guy's case, he was kind of shy. Anyway, he wasn't one of the better players, and we had a handful of players that they were ahead of the pack, and everybody was cool. It wasn't like anybody was any super like assholes or anything like that. But when you're confident, and then sometimes you can kind of put somebody else down or something like that. So that's kind of what was going on, and this guy, he was just very shy. He was like, it was almost like he wanted to give up. And my thing is, I got a problem with real cocky people. Everybody has talent, but if you have talent, you're born with it. It's a gift from God or whoever whatever. It's a gift, and you can cultivate that gift. But you shouldn't walk around like you're not better than anybody because you've got talent. We all got to go to the bathroom. We all got to do there's things that we all do. Just like so. So part of me is fueled by that, and maybe that goes back to when I was a kid playing basketball. There was this one guy that was like just super cocky, and I just had a hard time with but it made me work hard. I mean, he was just better, but I was just always trying to like better myself. So I always had a problem with those kind of guys. So I guess I gravitated to the people that had like low self-esteem or low confidence. It's like, I'm gonna help build your confidence. You're just as good. We just have to figure this out. So I guess it's driven by just wanting to even the playing field, if you will. We're all in this together, and also just like I said, just build up their confidence and say, you can do this. Let's figure this out. And learning patience. I had a decent amount of patience, but I really had to learn to be even more patient. And some people aren't going to get it, but if you're patient enough, they're going to get a little bit, and that's the key. Just little breakthroughs. It wasn't like I wasn't really concerned about the star. The star is already going to be the star, and then the star's got some other things to worry about. Maintaining that or whatever, and they might be. So I just kind of focused on how can I get somebody to make little steps. So that kind of fueled the way I approach, teaching or mentoring, whatever. I mean, that's what a mentor is. He kind of like doesn't do the work for you, but tries to point you in the right direction, kind of give you, that's.
Now, let's transfer that. Are you using those sensitivities with your son?
Yeah, but he's interesting because he's kind of a prodigy, So that's another challenge. He's like one of these like the top guys. I mean, and also to his credit, I mean, his mother's a musician too. She's a choir director, and she was involved in music, and she's very musical. Her thing is more like gospel and contemporary gospel, but she actually studied for a couple of years at Westminster Choir College, which was on the Princeton campus. So she knows music. She doesn't read music or write it, but she knows it intuitively. So he gets it from both sides. I think it's an even distribution of it, and I guess it was just kind of multiplied. So he's like, he's just natural.
When did you notice that he was?
Well, it took me a long time. My wife, on the other hand, she actually had dreams of him. She kind of knew, like, years before he was even born, that we were going to have this drummer, this guy that was going to be, like, killing. Seriously, because there's a story, she tells a story, this dream that she would have where there's this little boy with a ponytail beating on the stair steps, like the guardrail or something, and me saying, no, give Daddy the sticks. And we thought at the time it was my first grandson, who was like a couple years older, and he showed a little musical aptitude, but that kind of went, he started getting into other things. Then Mekhi was born, that's his name, and I think he was maybe like 2 years old, and he was, I have to back up. My wife said when she was pregnant, like she would be conducting the choir, and they'd be like on some like, high energy piece, and she could actually feel him kicking in her womb. So he was already kind of like doing that stuff, and she would actually sometimes have to like leave the church if they were like getting involved in some shouting music, and so he couldn't hear it. She'd have to literally walk away. So he kind of came out hitting, beating, banging on stuff. So I think it was, we had just moved into our house, and his uncle had given him some drumsticks, and he's beating on the wooden rail. He's just banging along. And I'm hearing this, and we literally just been there like a couple of weeks, and I'm like not thinking, no, because he's like, he's going to mess everything, he's going to break this. I said, no, give Daddy the sticks. And when I said that, my wife just jumped up and said, oh, did you hear what you just said? I said, yeah, we just moved in here, he's not going to mess up the furniture. I said, give Daddy the sticks. And then I realized, oh, God, that's the dream that you had like 5 years before he was born. So he started playing a little bit. He was more kind of playing like gospel music, and then something happened where he couldn't play that. So then I just started taking him with me to the, like LaRose. Once again, Tony Williams, So Tony's always been a big part of, that thread. So he would come in and play a little bit. He would listen. And even prior to that, I'd always have jazz in the car. So when I was taking him places, he was always listening to RTI. And when he was in his mother's car, he was listening to either contemporary gospel music or hip-hop, because his mother's 12 years younger than me, and she was like a hip-hop baby. And so she came like Jay-Z and all those kind of people. So he was being bombarded with all this different music. And yeah, I guess after, he didn't take to the jazz right away, and I didn't think he was going to really be that good. I thought he'd be okay. I had no idea he would, turn into what he turned into. And I remember one time he was practicing, and I went in and I brought my bass, and we started playing like a swing tune, and he sounded pretty good. So I started playing a little harder, and he's playing, and so I started like playing like harder still, and he's right there with me, like he's just like matching me, like this, and like kind of pushing me. So then I start like really playing, like as if I'm like playing with grown people, like I'm really like digging in, and he's laughing at me, and he's like playing all this stuff, and he's like basically he's dusting me, really. He's like really just kind of like. So oh shoot, I walked out of there. I said, man, I think we got something here, this guy. So yeah, but I mean, once again. And I owe a lot of that to him coming, sitting in. Tony was very gracious, and he would sit in with the group. And at the time, Craig McGuire was playing drums, and it was Dave Hosman. Well, actually, before that, it was like Don Wilson, the late great Don Wilson, who was another kind of mentor without really mentoring, just listening to him play. He came up in the 50s with all those guys, he became a police officer, but he still played, and I learned so much from, harmonically and stuff in tune-wise. He was just one of those kind of people. Later became Dave Posmentier and Aaron Graves, that would split the LaRose, and he started coming in there at age 3. He's 12 now, so for the last 9 years. And also playing in front of that audience. Those are people that followed Tony. So the average age in there was like 75, 80. So being in that kind of nurturing environment, I call it like church with alcohol, because you had that spirit, So him come at a very early age, absorbing music that way, with a lot of older people, I think that's what kind of helped accelerate him. In addition to whatever God-given ability he had, and he did a lot of listening on his own.
It's
But
amazing how that innate talent with a nurturing community.
it just kind of, yeah. I mean, because I didn't really, I didn't really tell him much. I mean, I give him pointers here and there, but he's very self-motivated. But just being in that environment, and then also in this day and age, you have the YouTube age, and you have you can go online and see videos and different things. You have access, so I think all that helped. But I don't know if he would have got that anywhere else. I think just Philadelphia. It just kind of, he was surrounded. And then when I'd take him out to Chris's, which is, after Ortlieb's kind of shut down permanently, I mean, it's open now, but now it's not jazz. Chris's kind of took up the mantle to become that place. And, playing with some of those guys, some of the guys that were in school, I should back up because I started teaching at Temple, I guess, 2005, maybe the year before he was born. So started dealing with, those kids on that level, and they're figuring stuff out. So, yeah, I mean, he has access, so they're kind of like all his bigger, like adopted big brothers and sisters. So we're all just trying to figure this music out. So
what do you think? Go with the Temple, since you're into education too so much. What do you think the state of jazz education in Philadelphia is now compared to?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot back then. We got, the Temple had the program had to be built up, and I give Terrell Stafford a lot of credit for that because he came in and he didn't have a lot to work with. At the time, Temple was really trying to get their football team to, be of some kind of stature. And they did. They put a lot of money into it. So Terrell had to fight a lot of stuff. Actually, at the time, he wasn't even the jazz guy. He was actually conducting like marching bands and doing stuff. So it was kind of frustrating, but he hung in there, and they saw that he was about something. His career was kind of taking off. So he kind of built it up. As far as Philly, I think it's okay. I think it benefits from having Philadelphia, just having this town with such a rich history, and a bunch of players that are from here that have, been here all along. I mean, by that time, I'd been in Philly 20 years now, so I'm definitely like a Philadelphia guy. Sid Simmons and all those guys. You had Ortlieb's, in the mid-'90s to the early, mid-2000, maybe 2010. That was available, So I think it's good. I think people are coming here, in terms of like I think in Temple we have a faculty that kind of rivals anywhere. We have a lot of folks from the New York area, a lot of folks that are playing active.
There's definitely a rivalry though between U of Arts and.
Yeah, there's a rivalry, but that's just the school themselves. The
Yeah.
people the musicians, they actually they come together, and they come together at the jam sessions outside of the school. I think it's just philosophically there's some differences with the schools. I think I don't want to talk bad about any schools. I think our schools. Well, because it's part of a university, I think the kids have a more diverse experience. I think U of Arts is more like it's just an art school, without all the other stuff. So you can kind of be a little cloistered, for lack of a better word. And I think a lot of those kids don't come out like they should. But I mean, the fact of the matter is they produce a lot of great bass players, a lot of great drummers. And the point is the kids meet outside of the school. And that's where a lot of learning takes place, a lot of cross-referencing, a lot of, checking different people out. So in that respect, it's good. And we have a lot of places to play. In recent years, there's a jam session at least somewhere every night of the week, somewhere. And the kids are taking advantage of it. Like I would hope the U of Arts kids to a lesser extent, but I think maybe they don't know about it, or maybe they're just kind of inundated with their schooling. They got a different agenda.
Yeah.
It's a fulfilling type of agenda that it's different. Like I say, Temple is a regular school, and we encourage, getting out there and taking advantage of what's available.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important. And for the handful of kids from U of Arts that have gotten out of that, or and taken advantage, they they benefited. And we certainly encourage, those kids. If you live in Philly and if you're a young person, I'm going to try to help you. And everybody, that's why I'm here. That's my assignment. Remember, I'm like, so I'm not like, yeah, I'm Temple. Yeah, I'm going to tell everybody, come to Temple. I'm biased. Oh yes, I think we've got our school. Like I say, our school rivals New School. Our school rivals Manhattan School. Our school rivals Juilliard. Our school rivals Berkeley. We've got people that are. Plus, we got Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia is like a jazz center. I know it is. I know for me, I wouldn't have. Had I stayed in New York, it's ironic because I'm from New York. Had I known I was going to be a jazz guy, I would have stayed there. I didn't know I was going to do that. You're talking about somebody taking the long way around. That's like Forrest Gump. He's running backwards. No, that way. And he's like, by that time, I'm like, way the hell. So I took the long way. But I landed here where there was just a rich heritage. So I just owe so much to this place, just in terms of what I learned and what I'm still learning. So I got to give it back, and I'm still learning. So that's what it is. So it's a shame that there is some. I mean, I get the rivalry, I get it, but it doesn't really need to be. And like I say, the kids that know, and I just and they, like I said, that's a whole other thing they're doing over there. We're just part of a bigger picture. And I think our kids are probably more well-rounded. I would say to their credit, though, in terms of the more contemporary stuff that's happening, a lot of guys are from that school. They're doing a lot of stuff, like in the pop world, the rap world, the R&B world, and the non-traditional jazz world. So to their credit, maybe their faculty does a little bit more of that stuff, because there's some excellent people there too. In terms of the people that teach there, they're qualified. Like I say, I think it's just maybe the bureaucracy, the red tape, or the whatever their basic philosophical thing is. I think that's the main difference. And if they can. And we have our philosophy. I mean, we're more straight ahead school, but I try to do stuff, with, the non-traditional stuff like this. Music changed. In the 70s you had all sorts of stuff, and then the 80s came in, and folks decided this is just jazz, and everything else is not jazz, and it really messed a lot of things up. So part of me, I have a chip on my shoulder because I kind of came through that, and I survived it. Barely, but it's like, it's all good music. And Philadelphia's always been a music town. You had straight ahead jazz, but you also had R&B, you had rock and roll, you had free stuff, you had the Philadelphia Orchestra. You just had like sorts of stuff going on, and people going in and out. It wasn't just one thing. So I think that's the other takeaway. That's the other thing I take away from Philadelphia. It's a music town. They call Nashville a music city. I think we're more music, at least as music city as them. Not to knock them. They're smart. They grabbed the moniker first. We're busy trying to win Super Bowls and sell cheesesteaks and do all sorts of other stuff. But in recent years, but then again, Philadelphia's always produced musicians. They always have to a big chunk of musicians that are doing good in New York or wherever are from Philly.
Right.
So it's like there's something here. So I just want to be part of that. As each generation comes in, somebody has to do it. And like I say, looking at Tony, looking at Lovett Hines, looking at Bootsy Barnes, looking at Sid Simmons, who probably wouldn't even consider himself a mentor, but
let's talk about Sid.
Okay.
That's the last thing I want.
Okay.
Because Sid's not. I mean, if Sid was alive, I'd want to interview him. So let's.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, he would have because he's very humble, very not like he doesn't want the light on him.
I know. But talk about Sid.
Well, oh God, okay. He was. Where can I start? He might be my biggest influence, just in terms of, like I say, integrity and honesty. He was very non-judgmental. He was just living by example. He gave his all every time he played. When he was off the bandstand, he gave you his undivided attention. He treated everybody equally. He didn't have any kind of attitude. If anything, he didn't really think much of his playing. He liked playing, but he wasn't like he was walking around. He always felt like he didn't like listening to himself play. He always thought that he could be better, and he always kept trying. He always gave 100%. He always did, and it just had an integrity. It had a certain honesty. It wasn't BSing. He wasn't trying to play to get applause. He was doing his best. He was a wonderful accompanist. He was about the music. He was trying to make everybody sound good. Horn players loved playing with him. Some people couldn't handle it because he played so much stuff, but he was really trying to help the music, and he had a sense of humor, so sometimes some little funny, he'd play some goofy stuff here and there, very spontaneous, but he had a sound. And he really, like I say, him and Byron, but mainly him because he's, the chord instrument, and that's, bass. I'm trying to play bass notes that kind of fit. So he's a big part of what I heard. And I play with some good piano players. I play with, Ori Kane, Dave Posmentier, later on Orrin Evans, a bunch, Shirley, Trudy Pitts. But night after night playing with Sid in all these different situations, playing with all these, the level of players would vary, from tune to tune, from chorus to chorus, depending on who's on the bandstand. And he would just be there. He was just very consistent. And
what do you miss about him?
What do I miss about him? I miss that. I miss that honesty. I miss that feeling. I miss that knowing that. I miss that individuality. I miss sitting with him at the bar. I miss us listening to other people play, and him responding. I wish he was around to hear Mekhi. He would love my son. He would just he would just be laughing. He would just be like, just everything. He's just a one of a kind person. And I think anybody that had any kind of dealings with him would say the same thing. He gave everybody, people are known like, oh, he was my brother. He was John Swanner's brother. He was everybody's brother. He was everybody. He just the most down-to-earth person with integrity, with honesty, with, and I miss it all. I miss it all. I miss it, I miss it all. I learned so much from him. And, we played on the bandstand with Mickey a lot. I remember one time, Mickey would always, at the end of the night, he would, get anxious. I guess he wanted to go home, so he would start pushing the tempo. Everything would start rushing. And we said, we're not getting out here any quicker because you're, speeding up these tunes. So we would just kind of go along. Maybe he kind of tolerated us. He was so used to playing with Shirley and Arthur. And, at the time, a lot of his people that he had played with, they were no longer here. And he talked about that a little bit. I think he liked us. I think he tolerated us. But one night, he was doing this rushing thing. And Sid just started, for some reason, he just started sitting down so hard on the time. He was just he would not budge. No, you're not pushing me out of it. And so I felt him, he never really did that before. He was like, So I jumped on, oh, good, okay. So we just sat on his ass. We just sat on him. And we got through it, and we kept the tempos there. I don't know what Mickey probably got mad, but we just kind of stood our ground. So we're at the bar. Like I had my beer in my hand. I said, wow, Sid, you never did that before. You like, what happened? And he was like, he was a little annoyed because you never see him get angry, and he wasn't really angry. It was just more like he was just kind of like pissed, and he just said, yeah, like, yeah, Mickey, like, yeah, we love you and everything. We know we're not Shirley and Harper, but we've been nice to you long enough. And I just took a sip of beer, and I almost almost spit the whole thing out, and it was funny because he just kind of stood his ground. It's like, no, we're gonna do this, and I remember that. But I mean, that was one time, and it was kind of funny.
It's a great story.
It's a great story. It was like funny because because he was just kind of like, we be trying to hold him, and he was just, and he said, no, not this time, buddy.